It's a beautiful morning, Nigeria. Welcome to Daybreak on Trust Television. We are reaching you live from the nation's capital. I'm Zainab Bala.
And I am Ayubelia. Good morning, Nigeria. Thank you for joining us on the show this Tuesday morning. And if you're watching the show for the first time, you are our special guest today. Make it a date with us every weekday, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. for analysis and update on recent happenings in and around the country.
Well, today on Daybreak, cries over alleged exploitation of patients that are not enrolled on the National Health Insurance Scheme by private hospitals is increasing across the country. Former Executive Secretary of the National Health Insurance Scheme, Professor Usman Yusuf, joins us to discuss this.
Also on the show, Sudan's top general declared a state of emergency, dissolved the authorities leading country's democratic transition, and announced the formation of a new government after soldiers detained civilian leaders on Monday in what activists denounced as a coup. International relations expert Professor Muhammad Usman will be joining us to discuss this later on the show.
Well, Ali M. Ali, Editor-in-Chief, People's Daily, will be our newspaper reviewer for dailies on Daybreak today. But for now, let's take a look at the events of 26th October in world history. Join us again.
Well, there you have it, today in history. Now, something stood out for me on Today in History, and which is the fact that 26th of October 1863 football rules were formulated. Now, the world's oldest governing football body was created at the Freemasons Tavern in London. The foundation was instrumental in creating and formalizing rules of the game. Before this, every area and organization playing football made their own rules. Some of the rules, of course, you know about the kickoffs, will be taken from halfway, no side tackles, no offside, no throw-ins, no corners, etc. These are some of the rules of the game. Now, imagine a game without rules, Z.
It's going to be.
I'm just thinking in my head when I saw this, and it's very captivating. And I began to think, okay, if there are no rules in football, then means you can do everything and anything to get the ball into the net. So it includes, using your hands to hold on to the ball and keep running to
punches,
Exactly. So it's no longer going to be football, when you begin to do that. So it's very interesting that we have that happen in history, and today we remember that day. Now, for all football enthusiasts, then thank the people that decided to come together and make up those rules just to give the game some kind of uniformity and some kind of sense of purpose and all of that. So well done to you guys. All right, we'll be taking the dailies on Daybreak now, and like we told you, Ali M. Ali, the editor-in-chief, People's Daily, is in the studio to review the papers with us. But before we begin to look at the stories that made the headlines, let's go on this quick break.
But in a situation where you find that
not necessarily tribal or regional.
All right, the Daybreak, and it's talking about the dailies now on Daybreak. The stories that we'll be looking at will begin with the Daily Trust newspaper this morning, and the first story there says gunmen attack Niger mosque, kill 18 worshippers. You will find that on page 6. NLC rejects compulsory COVID-19 vaccination. Find that on page 10 of the Daily Trust newspaper. The lead story talks about what we discussed yesterday. Buhari launches e-Naira, says GDP to rise by 11.9 trillion naira. The right to that policy will aid government's welfare policy. 33 banks running e-currency as CBN mints 500 million naira. What do you need to know about e-Naira? So, in case you want to know more about this Nigeria's e-Naira project, you can pick a copy of the Daily Trust. The details are there on page 5. The lead story shows you the president launching the e-Naira. That's the logo there, carried by the governor of Central Bank, presenting to the president of Nigeria. Then you have beside that senators kick as EFCC transfers forfeited assets to AGF office. Kano demands 1% special status in revenue allocation formula. That's just like we saw in the case of Lagos State seeking special status. Well, we'll get to know more about that if you pick the copy of the Daily Trust on page 6. Now, my mother-in-law asked me to poison my stepchildren, woman tells court, and that's on page 27. At the bottom of that, Northern Coalition asked court to exit Southeast from Nigeria. Well, that's the whole debate about secession and all of that. You can pick a copy to get more information about that on page 10 of Daily Trust newspaper, and that's that for that.
Okay, let's take a look at the stories on the Punch newspaper this morning. Right on page 8, you'd find federal government plans 5 million solar-powered households, 250,000 jobs. And you'd find on page 23 of the Punch newspaper, federal government to end petrol subsidy, June 2022. World Bank condemns 2.9 trillion naira funding. Investors scramble for FBNH shares. Price rises over ownership tussle. And on page 2, you'd find $148 million consultants pay. Buhari governors meet. October revenue sharing suspended. And the Punch newspaper is also leading with the unveiling of the e-Naira by President Muhammadu Buhari. He also states MDAs may collect revenues, pay in e-currency. And one of the writers is saying Central Bank of Nigeria alerts banks to risks, fraud, threats. Apex Bank means 500 million naira e-Naira, issues 200 million to banks. Another rider also states e-Naira won't change Naira-dollar exchange rate. That's according to experts. And on page 10, you'd find Fashola, NLC folds federal government's asset sale. Privatization, minister demands audit. And on page 9, hoodlums storm Ogun school. 2 teachers hospitalized, others flee. And you'd also find PDP crisis deepens. Secondus pursues suit as party plans convention. These are some of the stories on the Punch this morning.
All right, next we'll be looking at the Nation newspaper, and the first story there says 10 held over lynching of police officer. You'd find 6 arrested in Nasarawa. That's the writer to that story. Gunmen kill 17, abduct 18 in mosque. Dawa raid in Niger. That's on page 3. The next story there says governors fail to access 51 billion naira UBEG funds. UBA posts 490.3 billion gross earnings in third quarter. And then you'd see also GDP to grow by $29 billion with e-Naira. And then the lead story says 2023, our politics rowdy but steer clear, Buhari tells envoys. The writer to that says President solicits direct investment. These are some of the major stories on The Nation this morning.
Okay, let's head to The Guardian this morning. The Guardian newspaper is also leading with the e-Naira going live. CBN floats a new scheme to boost economy. 33 banks join platform. CBN needs 500 million. Transactions on e-Naira free for 90 days. Another writer is also saying Buhari insists on close monitoring, says digital currency will boost GDP by $29 billion. You'd also find CBN says foreign reserve surpasses $40 billion. You'd also find Northwest demands lion's share of revenue allocation to states, local governments. You'd also find on The Guardian, don't force workers to vaccinate. NLC advises federal government. Fresh trouble for Orji Kalu as federal government asks a court to order retrial in alleged 7.1 billion fraud. These are some of the stories you'd find on The Guardian.
All right, the paper that we'll be looking at, the last paper as a matter of fact, is a Blueprint newspaper, and beside the nameplate there by the right corner of the paper, manufacturing, CBN sets up financial instrument, the 100 for 100 PPPP. You'd find that on page 22, and then you would have also e-Naira will boost our GDP by $29 billion in 10 years. That's according to Buhari. World Bank blacklist 18 Nigerian companies, individuals on page 18. Ex-militants storm Governor Ayade's office over unpaid allowances. The lead story on the Blueprint, Sheikh Gumi to Yoruba Igbo clerics. Talk to IPOP, Igboho, as I talk to bandits. You'd find also the writer there saying he warns Buhari against declaring them terrorists. Stop tagging terrorism as banditry. That's according to Akeredolu. Also another story there says you are doing PR for gunmen. Omokri slams Gumi. Worshippers killed, 7 abducted in Niger Mosque. That's on page 3 of the Blueprint newspaper. You would find below the pictorial there, Anambra Guba. NSA reads the riot act to astonish others. That's on page 5. And also 2022 budget, Senate committee rejects science minister's presentation. Police, FRSC, VIO responsible for hike in food prices. That's according to an investigation. And I'm curious, really, and if you're curious just like me, maybe you should pick a copy of the Blueprint newspaper to find out how is the police, the FRS and VIO responsible for the hike in food prices. You'd find Oyo jailbreak, FG enlists Interpol to recapture fleeing inmates. And then the final story there says PDP convention, ignore distractions, Makinde urges members. Well, these are some of the stories that we would find, that made their way to the headlines this morning. Let's welcome our reviewer again, Ali M. Ali. You're welcome. Good morning, and it's good to have you.
Nice to have you.
Good morning. Well, first time being here.
Yes.
So, good morning, good morning, viewers.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining.
Nice to be here.
Yes, thank you for joining. Now, he's the editor-in-chief at People's Daily. Now, let's begin with the first story we saw. The story about the e-Naira is literally everywhere on the front pages of our newspapers, and the president seemed to be confident that this will, lead to the rise in GDP by 11.9 trillion naira. What's your thoughts on this?
Well, clearly, like you said, is the story that has dominated virtually all the headlines. If you look at all the papers, except for one or two, today is a question that you buy one, you read all. Virtually all the papers are leading with that story. Yes, and I think experts have said it's a welcome development. Perhaps it will help in stemming the tide of depreciation. The value of the nation's currency has depreciated over time because of, the CBN blames middlemen and speculators. Perhaps this will ease glide in the value of the nation's currency. But if you look at the economy experts will tell you that the value of the naira is still very strong. Locally, if you look at the purchasing parity of the naira, what it can buy here. For example, people make this argument that it's unfair to compare the naira with the dollar. That a dollar, which is the equivalent of 500 and something, if you look at it really, a dollar can fetch you, well, a decent meal. Even going by the proclamation of the former Minister of Agric that 30 naira can get you a meal that will make you belch, literally.
Wow.
Yeah, that is
in the same Nigeria.
Yes.
But I doubt about that because...
well, that is contestable. That is really contestable.
Yes.
So with the e-naira now, it will make a lot of things easier. That is, if you are transacting, according to the expert, is that you are actually getting the exact value that the electronic naira and the physical naira, they are of the same value, and they cannot be traded for profit like we are given to do with the physical naira, that is. And then if you look at, we're in the era of cashless economy, and I think this, for once, I agree with the expert that it will help inject perhaps new, fresh life to the naira. And like the president said, in 10 years, in about a decade, it will jack up the nation's GDP. But you see, jacking up the nation's GDP by a whopping 29 billion in a decade, well, that will remain in the realm of speculation, because there are so many factors that would make that happen. One of which people have argued, listening to experts between yesterday and this morning, is the issue of, well, security or lack of it. So that would determine whether we get to that.
Exactly, like you said, a whole lot of factors, were pointed out by experts.
Yes.
And one of which is the issue of acceptability, like one of the experts raised yesterday. The big spenders, literally, most cases, they don't even trade in naira anymore. They trade in dollars and all of that. So in terms of acceptability, within that circle, how far do you see this going?
Yes, well, that's one very naughty issue there, because why the value of the naira has depreciated over time is because of the pressure on it by people who rather, even ordinary Nigerians now, those who can afford, they rather save in dollars than in naira, because if you have, a year ago, if you had 1 million a year ago at about now, notwithstanding post-COVID-19 era, a year ago when you had $1 million, that's roughly about $30,000. But now, 12 months later, $1 million is less than $2,000. So you see, people rather save in dollars, in foreign currency, any of the major currencies. It could be pound, it could be euro, it could be dollars. But the favorite is dollars. Why? Because a lot of Nigeria, especially with medical tourism and even education, scholarship, people are sending their wards outside this country to study, and then they rather have the dollar. So yes, big time spenders, I don't see them actually using that much, and that brings us to square one. Unless the CBN, in a way, takes other stringent measures to compel big spenders to also use the platform. But like a lot of people have expressed this skepticism whether that's going to happen. Yes, and I think I share in that cynicism actually.
Okay. Now, could you comment, on the readiness of the e-naira to stand the test of time? Do you think the Nigerian government is ready, to take on that path?
Yes. Well, you see, going by the antecedents of our monetary policies, and indeed beyond even monetary policies, other policy is that is sustenance and persistence. Today, because why we have we are in this semi-economic quagmire, raging now close to 30 years, is because we have been inconsistent with our monetary policies and even fiscal discipline. But the CBN, largely is responsible for that. This inconsistency, for example, this minute they say, okay, we're going to give so value of the naira. Tomorrow we're removing the ceiling. Next tomorrow, another policy. For example, again, another example is when the CBN being the apex bank, this differential in the value of, there is official rate, then you have the parallel market, and that there is a lot of pressure there. So sustainability and consistent, going by the antecedents of the CBN and successive government, I don't see that. Unfortunately, I have also reservations about that. But then let's be on the side of optimism. Let's see the cup as half full rather than half empty. So yes.
Yeah, some will say that the biggest elephant in the room is the issue of how can Nigeria export more, to strengthen the naira and all of that. It seemed like that's where to focus.
Yeah.
So how is this e-naira thing going to help local manufacturers to be able to, export more? That way, maybe we'll have a chance of strengthening the naira.
Yeah, well, that is the crux of the matter, because the value of a nation's currency, more often than not, is determined by one of these factors, is production, not consumption. Nigeria's economy is touted as the biggest on the continent, but an economy that perhaps is judged by consumption. We have virtually become a net importer from a net exporter. In the 70s and even up to the mid-80s, Nigeria was a net exporter, and that's why the value of the nation's currency was very strong vis-a-vis other foreign currencies, especially the dollar. At a point, the value of a dollar was just 75 kobo to the dollar, but now look at it, it's 570 something now, as of yesterday. Now, how would you stimulate production? You look at the variables. What could, first, we just listed one now. Where there is insecurity, capital will not stay. Capital will not be domiciled there. That is one. And then there is energy, raging energy crisis nationwide. I don't know your neighborhood. In my neighborhood, you will rarely get maybe 24 hours in maybe 3-4 days. There was a time at a stretch we suffered blackout for 5 days. I is here in the central business district. So all these factors that would eventually, whether electronic or physical naira, would determine the value of the nation's currency. Production, most of our the base or the primary products are sourced here, but the production processes, you have to first, the machinery, they are not locally fabricated. You may have the primary produce here. Look at agricultural based primary produce. They're here in abundance. Some other countries come here, they take this primary produce, go add value to them, then return them, and we consume them at a much higher cost. Take for instance rice production. If you look at the value chain of rice, or look at crude oil, the mainstay of our nation's economy. If you look at the crude oil, there are so many additives. The value chain is enormous. There's bitumen, there's the gasoline, there are so many. But then what do we get in return? We take this crude oil out there, then you bring it at a much higher cost. Why? Because our refineries are not they're not producing. And even if they are producing at maximum capacity, demand outstrip supply. There will be that. What fills that vacuum, that gap? So these are factors that, yes, in the final analysis, the e-naira may not stimulate local production because of these factors I said. Primary producers are there, but then other production processes, the machinery, even the know-how, the managers. Over in the past, when Nigeria was a net exporter, most of the technological and technical know-how, they were indigenous. But now, with the downturn of the economy, a lot of brain drain, a lot of experts took flight elsewhere, playing their trade, either they're indigenous or foreign. So even that, you're going to have a lot of problem with that. Unless you are able to get all this into the mix, perhaps when China devalues its nation's currency, if you look at the value of the yen, is compared to the dollar. And that's why China economy is galloping, literally galloping, because it's an economy that is backed by production. The value of the yen is compared to the dollar is not much, but because they're exporting, when you need to export, you have to devalue your nation's currency. But we're not exporting anything, and we're devaluing the nation's currency.
Terrible indeed.
So sad.
Tragic.
So sad. Well, you know, others have also expressed reservation, you know, specifically bankers. They are skeptical and they feel threatened, you know, by this e-naira thing. You know, it looks like something that is going to take away their customers.
Absolutely.
And a whole lot of, you know,
Absolutely.
concerns are raised about
Exactly.
that. How are they supposed to position themselves in this instance?
You see, commercial bank, I think this is the problem with commercial bank. They've not been, apart from perhaps personnel management, they've not been thinking, they've not done traditional banking the way it should be done. Most of them are dependent on public sector funds, which are limited now. If you take away public sector funds from commercial bank, most of them will go under. There was a time major MDAs were asked to domicile their account in the CBN, and the commercial banks were gasping for breath, literally. Now, they will feel threatened because with the e-wallet, with the e-naira now, the Apex Bank is literally a bank, you and I. Unless they key in and then locate how they're going to perhaps maintain their customers, I see a lot of banks going to have a tough time. So it's understandable if they're uncomfortable with this new development. It's understandable because they have left traditional banking to rely more on, if you like, on one single public sector funds, and that's why the cutthroat competition.
But don't we stand the risk of, you know, rendering more people jobless, and you know, having more jobless people when we need to create more jobs? You know, and is this a concern?
Well, with automation, banks have rendered a lot of people jobless. With automation now, which is the way to go. A lot of people will be out of a job unless these individuals, and not because of the e-naira. We might know the e-naira with the dawn of technology, and like I said, with automation now, if you go, most of the banks, I mean most banks, and this is worldwide, self-serving. You go there, you can even deposit independent of the cashier. You can go to the bank, you deposit, you know, the same way you withdraw from automatic teller machine, ATM. So yes, a lot of people will be rendered jobless, especially in the banking sector. And with time, progressively, as we perfect digitalization, as we perfect the understanding of the digital world, a lot of people, unless they also eventually, people, young people especially, give themselves new skills, they may soon be out of, they'll be out there in the job market seeking for jobs there, and they've been taken over by automation or by machines, literally.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, with the unveiling of the e-naira, one would say, on the Punch newspaper right here, it states that Central Bank of Nigeria alerts banks to risks, fraud, and threats. Could you comment on that?
Well, you see, even without the e-naira, well, that's the difference now between the e-naira and perhaps when people, hackers, hack into bank accounts. I remember one of the leading commercial banks, I think one of the top three, there was a time, you know, some hackers actually withdraw hundreds of billions. It's just that it was kept hush-hush. So now, unless some of this bank, I mean, up their game, they face a lot of risk. But the joyful thing is the CBN has taken a lot of spend a lot of energy to protect such likelihood happening. So yes, I think it's not a misplaced alert given to the banks that they have to up their ante. There are banks that, you know, or like they said, the e-naira, or like when you do online transaction, is protected in such a way that it can easily be, your funds can easily be manipulated or being taken away from your account. Yes.
Well then, well, quite a lot of issues really. I mean, if we can continue to talk, it's inexhaustible,
well,
you know, on the issue. Yes,
I'm
but
not an economic expert, but to my understanding,
a lot is associated. We'll see how it all pans out.
that is it.
Another story that got my attention is NLC is already rejecting compulsory COVID-19 vaccination. We are aware that in some states, you know, the issue of compulsory vaccination is already ongoing, like in Edo State, I recall. Is there a cause for alarm here?
Well, I think this has to do with whether the workability of that. You know, like you said, Edo State blazed the trail. And then the federal government also took that cue. And eventually Kaduna, and I see more states doing that. And as usual, playing politics with it. Why? Because they say unless civil servants get vaccinated, chances are that they won't, like in the case of Kaduna, they've given a deadline to the end of this month. Get vaccinated or something, some penalty is going to happen. It's going to be meted out. Like it happened in Edo, people turned to work and they were turned back unless you bring your vaccination card. Now, this, whether they're going to meet the deadline is another thing altogether. If the vaccines are available, but you see, a lot of education needs to be done. You are a civil servant, the rest of your family isn't. So, if you get vaccinated, what happened to the rest of your family? Unless the government perhaps compel all other citizens to do that, I don't see that happening, because there are people who have been vaccinated before and they still get infected by COVID-19.
Exactly.
And some even die in the process. And again is the fact that, yes, there's been a lot of damage done to, up to this moment, there are people who are skeptical about I've gotten my second jabs, so I'm not talking, but there are a lot of people who think, some of us who have done that are really, they're waiting for us, you know, to perhaps get infected and die. I'm just saying, on a lighter note. So there are two people now, those who get vaccinated and those who are waiting for those who don't get vaccinated to die. And those of us who have been vaccinated waiting for those who have not been vaccinated to die.
Okay,
Because, yes.
So would you say the reason why we're having vaccine hesitancy is because of the fact that experts have said, well, even if you take the vaccine, you can still get infected?
No guarantees. So no guarantees. That is it. And then you see leading figures in biomedical industry expressing their reservations too, saying they are not taking, you see, and then in these days of, we're in information age, digital age, something that happened in far-flung places like Australia. You see it in the instant. It's been shared. The CEO of Pfizer was asked, have you taken the vaccination? He said no, because he's not in the front line. And then he gave some excuse that's not really tenable, which has not sat well with a lot of people, giving credence that to the conspiracy theories. I'm not saying it's real. I have taken my vaccine. I have encouraged members of my family to take. All my kids, my family members, they've taken that. But there are still people who are saying no, it's some kind of sinister conspiracy. Unfortunately, it's out there. I'm not encouraging it. But you see, compelling people, especially civil servants, it would appear that it's they're the easy dogs that can be compelled to do that.
Yeah, well, I think we have to end the discussion here. Thank you so much for coming on the show. We've been speaking with Ali M. Ali. He's the editor-in-chief, People's Daily, our newspaper reviewer on the dailies on Daybreak this morning. We appreciate your coming. Hope you have you again.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yes, thank you.
Goodbye, viewers.
All right, let's take a short break now, and then when we come back, we'll be delving into our first discussion of the day, talking about NHIS and the recent concerns raised about high expenses of, healthcare in Nigeria. Please stay with us.
African fabric is finding its way to the global stage. But Nigeria is losing out on big textile spenders as the local industry faces imminent extinction. Behind me is the Arewa Textile Mill, established in 1963 and eventually closed down in 2004. From over 180 textile mills in the 70s, only about 25 mills now operate at less than 40% capacity.
I'm an employee of Arewa Textile PLC before it closed. After a month, I was just like a madman.
In a day, they laid off 4,500.
The once thriving sector struggles to compete with an annual import of $4 billion.
Smuggling is the order of the day.
For manufacturers, we cannot compete.
We visit the nation's textile hubs to seek answers to why the sector has failed to return to its glory days despite government's intervention.
Get latest updates on current topical issues and breaking news by downloading the Trust TV mobile app on your Android devices. Go online, click Google Play Store, search Trust TV, install the app, and get doses of unfiltered information on happenings all over the world in your pocket. Trust TV, documenting the Nigerian story.
Suleiman, Aya, and Tari, all from the Sulubawa clan, with a unique wealth of culture and deep love for cattle. which truly reflects their sense of family. But over time, everything changes with no lands for grazing. Experience the incredible story of the Fulani people, loved ones they must protect, the journey they must take.
All right, thank you for staying with us. You're watching Daybreak on Trust Television, and if you're just joining, well, you've missed the first segment where we took a look at the newspaper headlines today on the show, and now we will be going into our first discussion of the day. Now, cries over alleged exploitation of healthcare in Nigeria, of hospitals, private hospitals in Nigeria, is increasing as a result of the increase in the cost of healthcare, access in Nigeria. And we have in the studio the former Executive Secretary, NHIS, Usman Yusuf, Professor Usman Yusuf, to spotlight, this conversation. A lot of concern is being raised, but before we talk about the whole rise in the cost of healthcare in Nigeria, let's get your thoughts about one of the stories that we looked at about the skepticism of some Nigerians from taking the COVID-19 vaccine and all of that.
Right. So this is very, very important. I've had people say, oh, it does this, it does this, it does this. That's not true. I'm a physician. This is 39 years going to 40. All my family and my 80-year-old mother-in-law living with us have gotten it. So, and people say, oh, there are people that have gotten the vaccine and they still passed away. And they bring you example of recently General Colin Powell. General Colin Powell, if people don't know, he had other medical illnesses too. He had multiple myeloma. So, other medical conditions can alter the immune response. But it is those that have underlying medical conditions that need this thing more than everybody. So I encourage every Nigerian to please get vaccinated. The reason is this virus is still killing. I've lost 10 of my friends, many of them professors of medicine, before this vaccine came. People are still dying. And this virus is still with us, will continue to be with us for a very, very long time. My advice to all Nigerians, please get vaccinated, especially those that have underlying medical conditions, those that have advancing age. And the young ones that think they are not going to get it, well, they get it and go and give it to the old people and die. So, my advice, everybody, please get vaccinated. Forget this conspiracy. Let's move on.
Okay. Now, could you walk us through of what, the National Health Insurance Scheme is all about?
Right. So, you guys dragged me into this NHIS thing. I mean, I honestly didn't want to. I've moved on. It's been how many years? 2-3 years now. But the honest truth is that this is our country, this is our people, this is our health system. We cannot just sit around and see things continue to go wrong. NHI is essentially created when 2005 by Obasanjo, right? The whole purpose of NHIS is that all 200 million Nigerians get coverage, so that when you go to hospital, you don't have to be dipping into your pocket to pay. So reduce out-of-pocket payment for Nigerians. Here we are. How many years later? What percentage of Nigerians are covered? And how satisfied are Nigerians? And this is why we're here. And that was my fight in the NHIS.
Now we are reading, from a report by the Daily Trust newspaper, how that patients that are not enrolled under the NHIS are now being discriminated against. The report is suggesting that there's this preferential treatment, unfair treatment against those who are not enrolled under the NHIS, in favor of those who have been enrolled under the NHIS. So people who are not enrolled are now having to spend much more. It's becoming more like an exploitation. It's becoming more like an abuse of the whole program.
And this is it. So when I was there is the reverse, and the reverse is still true. That those that are on the NHIS, they are treated as second-class citizens in the hospitals.
Right.
And that was why during my time I posted desk officers in all hospitals, all major hospitals, that if a patient goes to an area and they say, oh, it's not covered in the NHIS, by the NHIS, he comes back to the desk officer and the desk officer fights for him. So hospitals play fast and they don't, the whole system is messed up. And this was part of the fight. We needed to shake the tree and make things. From the NHIS, and I admitted, I was the very first to admit, we are the regulators in the NHIS, but we're not doing as good a job as we should be doing. Keeping an eye on the HMOs, keeping an eye on the hospital, and keeping an eye on the patients too. Because there's a lot of corruption too, or patients. I mean, these are Nigerians. So, a patient will be covered, NHIS goes to hospital, they say, oh, they will give you a substandard, oh, you're not entitled to see a consultant, and this is not true. People need to get educated about their coverage in the NHIS. And the NHIS, as a regulator, we needed to do a good job to regulate ourselves, look inwards. And I was the first to admit our problem was, the problem of the NHIS essentially was the NHIS, because we were not being good regulators. We needed to look at, we were in bed with the bad guys, the HMOs and everybody else. So we needed to look at ourselves and cleanse ourselves. We needed to look at the biggest bad guys are the HMOs. We give them money to give hospitals. And before I came, what they used to do was to give them 3 months money 3 months ahead on behalf of the patient or his family to give to hospital when that patient comes. 3 months ahead. I don't know if you get paid 3 months ahead. Like they give you 3 months salary before the time. NH, they will give them, HMOs give them 3 months ahead. When patients go to hospital, they don't pay. And patients call me when I first came, and hospitals call me. Many hospitals went under because HMOs were not paying. They were holding on to the money. And over 90% of them are out there in Lagos. They cash in their checks, they don't know what's happening in Maiduguri, Kontagora, Katsina, or Daura, or Kano. And I said that was not acceptable. I needed to shake the tree. And they said, oh, don't go to the NHI, don't rock the boat. Please, let things lie. I said, no, I'm going to sink that boat. Because, look, NHI's money is blood money. It's money meant to pay for people when they go to a hospital. And of all the agencies in this country, NHIS has the potential to make an impactful difference in the lives of our people.
Now, would you say that the NHIS has enough funding to really take on its mandate, as required by the Act setting it up?
Trust me, funding is not the problem, but misuse of the money is the issue. My fight in the NHIS was public. I mean, everybody knew. I mean, it's no secret. Daily Trust was in the trenches with me. It's enough money. It's enough money to, you see, NHIS sustains almost all hospitals in this country. The money we give to teaching hospitals, the money NHIS gives to teaching hospitals every month is more than the money they get from the federal subvention. So money is not the problem, it's just how the money is being managed. You take money, they're supposed to go to hospitals, you give to some contractors called HMOs, but don't give the money to the hospitals. And many hospitals are going under. So, unless you shake the system, and there are a lot of interest groups.
Now, a lot of years down the line after the setting up, we are talking about barely maybe 1% of the population captured under this NHIS thing. Is it a problem of lack of awareness, or, people don't just like enrolling into the program?
No. So you see, I really, my wife says, forget this NHIS, let's move on. But you guys keep sucking me into talking NHIS. So when I first came, they would give you numbers. When I first came, I mean, never done this office work, so I needed to know what's all this NHIS about. I would take Ghana Must Go Home and learn stuff. 3 months I knew what it was all about. And then I realized what the problem is. NHIS, the regulator, give money to HMOs that are supposed to disburse to hospitals on behalf of patients. Many of these hospitals, many of these HMOs, their licenses had expired 2-3 years before I came. So we're dealing with unlicensed, unregistered entities, giving them people's money 3 months ahead. What do they do with the money, I ask? They don't give? Or they use that money as collateral to get money from the bank, they invest that money, all sorts of shenanigans.
Okay, so is this why we see a scenario where you go to the hospital and then you are asked, are you under NHIS? And then you say yes. And then the kind of treatment, you get. Some are given substandard drugs, some are given, some kind of I don't care attitude. Is this the reason why we see a lot of that happening?
Right, because you don't have people advocating for them. And the drugs they call substandard are generic. So when I go to when I go to a pharmacy to buy antibiotics for my daughter, I say Ampiclox. So I tell them I want branded Ampiclox because generic will cost 1,000,
right.
Branded will cost maybe 100, but they are the same. And people call them substandard. They are not substandard. And generic, branded generic are okay. They are good. But the main issue is that NHIS, over the years, there was nobody to advocate, to fight for the common man called enrollee. And that was my fight. NHIS was meant for enrollees. But everybody was, from the ministry to the House, to the Senate, to HMOs, to everybody was just saying how much we can get out of this ATM. Nobody cared. So that was the fight. And unless, of course, we look at ourselves in the face and say we're not doing the right thing, nothing will change. It's all going to be, we're going to do this universal healthcare coverage in 20, nothing will change if we don't. Corruption, corruption, corruption. Fix it. This government does not have the stomach to do the right thing, period. And I saw that during my fight. I was alone in the trenches. So corruption is endemic in healthcare financing in Nigeria. We'll just be going tinkering with the edges. Nothing will change. So let's face the truth. We are not fighting for the common man. The common man is the enrollee. And that was my fight.
So how much information do Nigerians have really about NHIS?
Right.
And what does it take to be enrolled, under the NHIS?
Yeah, so call the new guys on the NHIS. Let me tell you this. Ayuba, when I came and I went and talking about the NHIS, and people say, shh. They don't want people to know there's a lot of money in the NHIS. They don't want people to know what the NHIS is doing right or wrong. They don't want the world to know what the HMOs are doing wrong or the hospitals are doing wrong. It's our duty and responsibility as the NHIS to educate Nigerians of their rights. And it is also the responsibility of HMOs to educate the enrollees of their rights. And it is also the responsibility of hospitals to educate patients. But nobody cares about the enrollee all through. And the enrollee is not assertive. It's their money. It's their money. And the organized labor, NLC, TUC, who claim it is their workers' money, who are supposed to be advocating for enrollees, who have a seat in the NHIS board, are not doing as well as they should be doing. So the failure is all over. The NHIS, the government, who bears the most responsibility, the NHIS, the hospital, the HMOs, organized labor, they are leaving the enrollee in the shuffle.
So who is supposed to, perform the oversight function to see that this happens?
Good. The NHIS is supposed to be the regulator over the years, regulating everybody. Because the money, bulk of the money, we're talking hundreds of billions, coming into the NHIS, and we're just dishing it out, no questions asked. When we started asking questions, then it's a problem. Stepping on feet, shaking trees. Yeah, so we will continue to shake these trees, and inshallah it's going to be okay. But it's not where we need to be. How many people are enrolled? How many people are satisfied with the NHIS?
Right.
Which hospitals will they go to? All these questions we were asking and continue to ask, and throughout my 3 years, there's been the fight. It's not the end of the fight. We'll continue to fight this fight until things are right. But government does not care about healthcare. But there's a lot of money in the NHIS. In the NHIS to do the right thing. Healthcare in Nigeria is almost collapsing. Incessant strikes. Doctors and nurses that we spent money to train all these years, they are leaving. These are professionals that have choices in life. Canada will suck them in. United States will suck them in. And we're here. COVID-19 should have taught Nigerians a lesson. The lesson is, even Dangote, you couldn't go anywhere with all your money. You need to fix your health care. And in Nigeria, in Abuja today, if you get massive heart attack, if you get massive stroke, or if you get head injury, there's nowhere that will save you. Nowhere. The reason is you need a short critical window. The honest truth, everybody knows that. Those that don't know it need to know that there is not a hospital in this country, Nigeria, public or private, that functions optimally. None. I know, because I practice here, practice in the UK, I practice in the United States. Forget all the beautiful ambience. The honest truth is we need to look into ourselves. There is not a single hospital, public or private, that functions optimally in this country. None. And we're all at risk. All at risk. Do you think you've stolen $1 billion? You get a massive heart attack, you have nowhere to go to be treated within a short window. Or a stroke. Or a head injury. Or you'll be flown out tomorrow like a corpse. We need to fix our healthcare system. Government needs to do the right thing. Government is not serious. The president has left to the UK now for his healthcare. Governors go out of the country for their wives to deliver. We don't care. There's a little man that's left in the shuffle. So this was my fight. Will continue to be my fight over the injustice in the healthcare system.
So looking at the challenges in the healthcare system, would you now say that it's justifiable, the high cost that we are seeing, that ordinary Nigerians have to now pay, for their healthcare? Right.
So the whole idea of insurance is to reduce what you pay. If only I am insured and Trust TV have a hospital, and I go, only I am sure, you have to pay more. Even in the UK where I practice, the whole idea, everybody was taxed. The whole idea was that the rich pays for the poor, the strong takes care of the weak, and we all are taxed to pay for those that cannot afford. That is what universal health care is all about. The government must increase the number of people that have insurance, so that you and I that are healthy, when we pay, we'll be able to take care of our old ones or the ones we left home out of our insurance. And government should pay for those who cannot pay for themselves. So the bigger the pool of the insured, the more we are able, especially healthy insured, the more we are able to take care of the weak and the sick. But if you have only few that are insured, and you have a lot of sick people, we are not going to be able to reach that goal. So government needs to get serious and say, let's forget all this deception or universal healthcare coverage. This is our reality, and they know it. Everybody knows it, from top to bottom, that we're just tinkering on the edges, doing the same thing. There is enough money in this country to give our people quality healthcare. Wherever I practice, in the United States, in the UK, you find the best doctors there are my fellow Nigerians. We have enough quality human resource in this country, but we're pushing them out. For what? For silly things like, what do they call it? Hazard allowance and all that. What is it? How much does it take a governor to fly from all these places? Take care of the professionals who take care of your healthcare system. So, government from federal to state do not take health care of their people seriously. It's not their priority. This is the honest truth.
All right. Now, earlier we talked about COVID-19, and the NLC is kicking, about this compulsory COVID-19 for civil servants and all of that. Is that really necessary for us to go that route, talking about, compulsory COVID-19 vaccination?
Right. So, I mean, the ministry or the government should have done better reach out, better schmoozing of labor union, educating people why it is important to do that. Daily Trust can say, if you don't come, because it's a private company, you don't get immunized, you're not coming into this business. It's up to you to do that. So the federal government should have connected with labor union, organized labor, and educate them more and get them to help the government to get the people to do that. You can't make people do things compulsorily. That's when people revolt. So the way to do it should have been better. But my advice, my call to all Nigerians, that please, 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 and please get vaccinated. Because the more we get vaccinated, the shorter this virus remains with us. People are still dying. I know I've lost dear friends, physicians, the best among us from this disease. People are still continuing to die. And the virus will be here with us forever unless we all get vaccinated. All of us get vaccinated. And if you don't get vaccinated, you're not traveling anywhere. So it's very, very important. Government needs to dialogue better with labor union to get workers to do the right thing. This is my advice.
Well, it shouldn't be a thing of a mandatory thing, isn't it?
Okay.
Because practitioners like you have said, well, it's unethical to force medication on
No,
people.
it's unethical to force even your little kid. You can't force him or her to do stuff, but you know the importance of them. You have people that work for you and at home. You can't force your houseboy or house girl, you must take this vaccination, but you convince them, tell them that if they say they don't want to, the option is you let them go. So the messaging should be different. We are all in this mess together. This is the message. We're all in this mess together. The more of us get vaccinated, the better and well protected our society becomes. So messaging must continue. There's not going to be anything by force, military. No.
Okay.
Well, very interesting conversation. We must thank you so much for coming on the show this morning. We look forward to having you again on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Don't
much.
talk to me about NHIS again. I'm done.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We've been speaking with Professor Usman Yusuf, the former Executive Secretary of the National Health Insurance Agency, NHIS, talking to us about the recent concerns about rising the cost of healthcare services in Nigeria and alleged exploitation of private hospitals, on non-NHIS patients and all of that. Thank you so much again for coming.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Let's take a quick break now, and then when we come back, we'll continue our conversation on the program. Please stay with us.
African fabric is finding its way to the global stage. But Nigeria is losing out on big textile spenders as the local industry faces imminent extinction.
Behind me is the Arewa Textile Mill, established in 1963 and eventually closed down in 2004.
From over 180 textile mills in the 70s, only about 25 mills now operate at less than 40% capacity.
I'm an employee of Arewa Textile PLC before it closed. After a month, I was just like a madman.
In a day, they laid off 4,500.
The once thriving sector struggles to compete with an annual import of $4 billion.
Smuggling is the order of the day.
For manufacturers, we cannot compete.
We visit the nation's textile hubs to seek answers to why the sector has failed to return to its glory days despite government's intervention.
latest updates on current topical issues and breaking news by downloading the Trust TV mobile app on your Android devices. Go online, click Google Play Store, search Trust TV, install the app, and get doses of unfiltered information on happenings all over the world in your pocket. Trust TV, documenting the Nigerian story.
All right, thank you for staying with us, and you're watching Daybreak, reaching you from Trust Television. Now, Sudan's top general declared a state of emergency, dissolved the authorities leading country's democratic transition, and announced the formation of a new government after soldiers detained civilian leaders on Monday in what activists denounced as a coup. General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan announced in a televised address came after armed forces detained figures of the government in charge of leading the transition to the democracy since the April 2019 ouster of democratic President Omar al-Bashir. His statement came as clashes erupted in the capital, Khartoum, with soldiers firing live rounds at people who took to the streets to protest against the power grab. The violence was largely centered outside the army headquarters in the capital hours after soldiers detained Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok, ministers in his government, and civilian members of Sudan's ruling council, the information ministry said. Now, we have in the studio our guest, an expert of international relations that will be spotlighting that particular incident that happened in Sudan. But before we introduce him properly, let's take a look at this short clip, and then we'll be right back after this short break.
Suleiman, Aya, and Tari, all from the Sulubawa clan, with a unique wealth of culture and deep love for cattle, which truly reflects their sense of family. But over time, everything changes, with no lands for grazing. Experience the incredible story of the Fulani people. Loved ones they must protect, the journey they must take.
إعلان حالة الطوارئ في جميع أنحاء البلاد. ثانياً التمسك الكامل والالتزام التام بما ورد في الوثيقة الدستورية الفترة الانتقالية للعام 2019 واتفاق سلام السودان الموقع في جوبا في أكتوبر من العام 2020. ثالثاً تعليق العمل بالمواد 11 12 15 16 24 3 71 72 من الوثيقة الدستورية مع الالتزام التام بالاتفاقيات والمواثيق الدولية التي وقعت خلال فترة الحكومة الانتقالية.
All right, welcome back. If you are just joining us, this is Daybreak on Trust Television. And we have in the studio Professor Muhammad Usman, International Relations Department, Bayes University, Abuja. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Good morning.
Okay, now, can you walk us through, some of the reasons why this is happening and some of its implications?
Well, there are no reasons why this is happening because we cannot go into the theory of military interventions in Africa any longer.
Right.
And I think that that theory has collapsed decades ago with the acceptance of democratic rule all over African countries and especially in the sub-Saharan Africa. What we are witnessing is a relapse of lack of good governance in most of these states. We have seen 2 coups in West Africa. We are seeing another coup in Sudan. Could be a palace coup within because the general himself was part of the agreement and also he was part of the last military regime in which he toppled. And all the constitutional provisions in which he suspends, he has been part of the signatory of this arrangement between the military that came in that had stiff resistance from the public and top government technocrats in Sudan, which agreement ushered in technocrats to take care of the government to transit in 2023. So whatever he's saying is like betrayal of what actually had happened between him within the military and top civilians and technocrats in which he has toppled.
So don't we see democracy under threat now?
Well, democracy had always been under threat, either from poor leadership, poverty of African states. The economy is too bad in most of these states that operate because, of course, democratic project is expensive. We have seen it and it's running. But it is more under threat when you have military coups here and there. But I am happy to note the public and the press also note that there is stiff resistance and protest against the latest military that had come in. So it's an aberration. Nobody is happy. No one will be happy about coups. No matter how bad a civilian regime is, it's better experience than military coups in Africa.
Now, with this reoccurrence of coups that we've seen in Africa in recent times, it doesn't look like we've made significant progress. If you look at the history of Africa, over time, is that correct?
Well, that's correct. I will accept that proposal from you, but at the same time, we have to look inwards. Even though there are external factors that make these coups possible. But until the environment and the climate is really right, before anybody can exploit the situation. It is truly, I agree that this retrogression within the African governance, and also we ought not to be experiencing coups by now at this century.
Right.
And looking at bodies like the African Union, and this, regional blocs and all of that, what should their role be, and are they playing that role?
Well, it's commendable. The AU intervened in August on the Sudan crisis. AU came up with transitional arrangement where top civilian figures in Sudan and the military came together and agreed, signed a constitutional supreme provision that they called to transit the country into civilian. But we don't know. Out of the blues came this coup. And I think that it is the tension that had not been doused between the top civilian figures within the transition government of the former prime minister and the present leader that toppled it. there had been tension between the military and the civilian prime minister with top figures for some time now, some months ago, up till now that we have experienced this coup. And if that tension had been doused, definitely there wouldn't have been need for this. There had been called by international community, the United States and United Kingdom, to douse that tension, and they read in between the line that something could happen, could give way, and it did.
Okay. Now, talking about intervention, the U.S. issued a statement saying, with this coup happening now, Sudan risks assistance, which means they might not be able to.
In fact, they have suspended. They have suspended aid and any development that will come to Sudan, and that's true. But then, what is the lasting solution in this coup menace?
Right.
So we have to look at very transparent, accountable governments in Africa that come in the guise of democratic governance. Al-Bashir stayed so long, over 30 years, and had committed atrocities of human dimension. And of course, there are so many issues with people or presidents that stay so long in African states. You find out that as soon as they leave, even if it seems to be okay during their reign, you find definitely all is not well when they leave. You find certain transitional crisis, and who they prepare to rule will have difficulty in ruling the country, because the political system in Africa and the political transition skewed towards ethnic, regional political arrangement. And that's not good for most of these countries, because they are all colonial hangovers. And these colonial hangovers translate to that conflict immediately when a head of state leaves that stays so long. North versus South, religiously divided countries, ethnically based politics. Those are the issues. They are the basic characteristics of the political nature of African societies. And this nature of African society has not come at a time that we accept it. These are hard times. And it has not come by accident. It came by design. It's default of the colonial hangover. When they were leaving, they really felt that most of these states should not have a very one political figure.
Exactly, which
is they will call.
Which is why which is where my next question is leading. In terms of international politics and external forces interfering in some of these local politics and all of that. What kind of role are these while colonialists playing in this?
Unfortunately, we cannot keep blaming the colonial masters and what they left. They left us almost for half a century now, and most of these states are independent over half a century.
And are they independent really? Because that's arguable, because others will raise the issue of neo-colonialism and all of that.
That is beautiful. Nkrumah in the 50s, when Ghana was about to have independence, said to the whole world and Africa, seek ye first the political kingdom, and all else will follow. But before Nkrumah died, he realized that it is not the political kingdom that you have to seek for. If you are tied to the economic apron of the erstwhile colonial masters, you are never independent. And apparently, this has been happening. We cannot do now without heavy importation of goods and services, dependent on industries outside. We don't take decisions on our own. We are heavily indebted nations, very poor countries. You don't call yourself rich if you don't earn. And you always import, you don't export. Industries have collapsed. Almost the whole sectors in the society have collapsed. The educational sector, the health sector, our leaders go outside looking for medical attention. The heads of states and heads of parties always run to Western countries to seek for medical attention, and then they are celebrated when they come back. I mean, what kind of countries do we run in Africa? We have serious problem in fixing Africa, and unless the older generation give way, transit, whether they like it or not, they have to give way, either by age or they will collapse themselves. Definitely
by nature.
By nature, yeah. They have to give way. So because change abhors vacuum, there has to be somebody that will take care of governance somehow, somewhere. But then we pray that hopes like this in Sudan should not be dashed. There was a renewed hope in Sudan for transition by technocratic arrangement, and it was on course till 2023. But here comes another coup. So it's bad omen in Africa. Most of these countries that are in Africa and they surround these countries that make coup here and there will have to shiver. They will have to shiver because by and large these are not issues that we have to accept.
Right.
Yeah, no matter what, we have to allow democratic project and governance to transit itself. Probably by that, when we stick to this and by and large we celebrate democracy, I think we'll have leadership that are transparent and accountable.
Now, are you confident that democracy in Africa is delivering dividends to the people? And if it's not, why is it not doing so?
Well, it depends on party and party politics. When you have countries in Africa that the democratic transition within party is not even democratic, you cannot transition itself, an election itself will have problems. The extant laws that will govern the election will have problems because figures within the country will hijack most of transition rules, governance, to godfatherism, to what they feel. So if you don't have that free flow of democratic governance where people come outwardly and elect their leaders and show that this truly is a popular election, not selection, then you have it there. Because those people that govern you must come from you. And if they come from you, the expression is that they will defend you at all times. And you will stand by them. But if it is an arrangement where a national cake is always celebrated in symbolic presentation of budgets within states in Africa, then a total failure had come. And will continue to fail. There is no reason why we will not fail if we celebrate budgeting. We celebrate budget that is not implemented. We celebrate budgets that don't serve these sectorial allocations. And when you look at all the indices of budget implementation, by the end of the year, you find out that there is total failure.
Well, many will say it seems like coups are on the rise, in Africa. I've seen one in Guinea, now in Sudan. Some will say, well, is it now becoming a trend, for African
Well, it's not going to be a trend. I always say that bad governance, fish get rotten from the head. It's not from the body or the tail. So we must have to get our leadership right. And then this vacuum that is left for leaders to have to mentor the young ones to take care of leadership, not within a locality or tribal arrangement. No, I fault that. I like to see a leader coming from the southeast mentoring my own northern elites. See a South leader with Southwest. See a Southwest leader with Northern elites. The message will be sent to this crop of mentees that if this mentor is off, you will have to fill in a beautiful vacuum and continue with a unity. All we see is different. There are some sections of some countries, they don't even have mentors. God knows how transition takes place. If you know what I am talking about, you should understand what I mean by now.
All right, now, what are the lessons, if there are, for Nigeria in some of these experiences that we've seen in other countries like the Sudan, and where we've seen?
Well, the lesson is regional cooperation. ECOWAS will have to come out and condemn the coup in Sudan. It will affect their group solidarity, even if Sudan is not within the West Africa region. So, regional cooperation, regional rebuke, and AU has to come out also and reject this. We shouldn't wait for external reaction. Internally, even if there are reasons, we shouldn't. There are unexcusable reasons for this kind of coups to keep happening in Africa. So regions, regional organizations like the ECOWAS, like the AU, will have to come up with strong measures. Not only always to condemn, not only always to say, take it back, bring back the, which they will not do by the end of the day. It has already happened. We have seen many examples. So, but then, let there be measures, concrete measures that coups, to attempt a coup or to think about it, must be discouraged within the military institution. They must be subjected to civilian loyalty and obedience. And especially coups like this that are not popular. While transition is on from December 2018, when we saw the problem in Sudan, to the coup that happened, to the ouster of al-Bashir, and to the transition months by months up till April 2019, and then the arrangement in August by the Transitional Council in Sudan, and then suddenly you find this. I mean, it's unacceptable to the international community.
Right.
These regions have to come together, and the heads of states need to come together to put their heads. But then they also have skeletons in their cupboards.
Right.
They cannot, with authority, come out and say, don't do this, do this. Some of them have proposal to also extend their rules. So how can they go ahead and talk about another rule in another country? They are grappling with their own internal problems of homunculus dimension. That they are too eager to leave seat with much problems for others to succeed than solutions. This is what is happening in Africa.
So how do we move away from this?
I think you have to come to the class. You do have to come to my class so that I take you on Africa's political economy and leadership.
We are in Trust TV's class now, on international relations. Well, before you would answer that, let's take this quick break, and then when we come back, you give us an insight on how to come up, this situation.
Yeah, she looks despondent. Where do you go?
Let's take up this break now.
Get latest updates on current topical issues and breaking news by downloading the Trust TV mobile app on your Android devices. Go online, click Google Play Store, search Trust TV, install the app, and get doses of unfiltered information on happenings all over the world in your pocket. Trust TV, documenting the Nigerian story.
why wallahi ban sparing me, so I keep it.
All right, thank you for staying with us. And if you're just joining, you're watching Daybreak on Trust Television, and we've been having discussions with Professor Muhammad Usman. He is an expert of international relations here in the studio from Bayes University, giving us perspectives on the recent, I would say, a coup in Sudan. Now, before we went on, my co-anchor was asking the question about how do we come off this, and it also, led me into thinking about, when I mentioned the lessons, for a country like Nigeria. If you look at the history of Sudan, it has, this history of secession and all of that, where you had the breakaway from South Sudan and all of that. Now, yet we are seeing this recurrent, experience there. Does this validate or negate, the conversation about secession and
since Darfur became independent as a new state, their crisis came on leadership issue also, and they had tremendous oil resources to take care of them, and the external involvement made it messy. And the leadership, Salva Kiir and the other guy, his deputy, became so much, it was like a personality clash. But then they came from different ethnic backgrounds. But after much conflict, they now realize that they have to come together and work together, because they have lost lives and property, and the nation had to move on. And all we hear is silent since last year, since before the COVID. And thank God the COVID also put down so many conflict-prone areas, because COVID itself came in as a threat to most of those leaders. So they ceasefire, they came to the negotiating table, and then they are on, and they are making progress in Darfur. What we are witnessing today is the conflict within Sudan, the northern part of Sudan, and then Sudan itself. That conflict has its genesis with the long-term rule of al-Bashir and his ouster, with the culmination of the protest in December 2018, which brought about hardship in Sudan. The revenue has dropped because most of the revenue that Sudan is getting, besides uranium and other materials that produce high energy and nuclear substance that Sudan export to developed countries, most of what it gains from oil has been cut off to Southern Sudan. And that also could be a reason for repositioning themselves to new realities that they met. But by and large, the Southern Sudan are doing well, the Darfur region, with the intervention of the United Nations and the peacekeeping forces on the ground, the AU and other well-meaning international communities and NGOs that have intervened in Sudan. They have brought about they have mitigated serious issues. I think Sudan will be one, because these are challenges of nationhood, and as I said, that long-term leadership of our country breeds certain conflict itself.
Okay. I've been meaning to ask this. Egypt, very close to Sudan, had military intervention with El-Sisi, emerging as the new leader. But this did not make the international community to actually cut ties with them. What could be responsible for the reaction in the situation for Sudan?
Well, Sudan had been under the tutelage of Egypt itself. And Egypt had received tremendous support from the United States, especially, and the European Union. Why? Because Egypt in the Middle East is strategic on the issue of the conflict with the Palestinian crisis and Israel. And Israel is by extension United States ally, they say, but it's like its own child. So United States will not allow Egypt to be, it's a strong country, well recognized, well established, historically rich, but what is happening within the Middle East, and especially with the Palestinian issue, Egypt will not be allowed to play so much significant role within the North African Arab states.
Okay.
Yes, look at the Arab Spring. If Egypt were to produce a leadership, Egypt will have come down so many, but it was engulfed itself in the Arab Spring. If you remember, the ouster of Mubarak, if you remember, and the coming of Morsi, the Brotherhood, soon after Al-Sisi came in. And if you look at all this drama and transition, and you look at it supposedly only within the spectre of politics and economy of Egypt, you are wrong. You are wrong. You have to connect it with international communities, with the support Egypt gets in defense and security from the United States, with tremendous pressure from the White House to act according to how Washington needs Egypt to act.
Oh.
Well, very, very powerful thoughts there. Now, on the final thoughts now, what are African leaders to look out for, to avoid such happenings, within their domain?
Well, African leaders need to have good transition. And not only good transition, they need think tanks. They need the academia. They need Institute of Policy and Strategic Studies suggestions of how to come up with a country that everybody will be proud of. There are a lot of people that have knowledge, but they are not utilized because those in government don't think.
Right.
Those that think are not in government.
Right.
you have this parity. It's a very humongous gap between those that are in government. Let them allow at least people to think for them.
The thinkers.
Yes, let them bring some certain proposals, certain beautiful proposals. Some of us will just be okay with a small house with one wife, 2 children, and then, and then we keep reading and thinking for them. And we don't need the money. We are being patriotic. So there has to be the synergy between knowledge and governance. If knowledge and governance don't come together, you have serious problem because they are seriously involved and indulge in governance. And they don't have time. You must excuse them. But they must have time to make consultations with the citizens of the country, with the various stakeholders, with elders, with leaders of thought, with past leaders that had tested the ground. Some of them are living up to 80-something years today. And so serious consultations is the business of governance. With the academia, with the think tanks, there has to be, because most of what I observed in the US when I was there in Boston, when I studied there as a Fulbright scholar, is the fact that most of the presidents in the White House brought academia close to them. Yeah. Science, administration, international relations. And if you look at the profile of Kissinger, the profile of former United States Secretary of States, most of them come from the academia. And they take the best from the best, and they sit down and simulate situations and find the best solution. Even Kennedy's 1962 or 64 missile crisis between US and Cuba had the input of academia. Scientists gave so many solutions to the power that the United States has today. So you cannot do without the knowledge, and then the governance gap should not be so much. You should constrict it. No matter what, you may fail, you may rise, and to El Dorado.
After all, you can never go wrong in the multitude of counselors, isn't it?
That's it.
All right then. Well, we want to thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your thoughts with us. We've been speaking with Professor.
Well, I must appreciate the Trust TV and how you guys have brought the Trust TV, the Trust, Daily Trust is owning this. I must say thank you. And this is my maiden edition of coming here. I've appeared in so many other media, but this is fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Hope to have you next time.
Yeah, sure. At all times, I will be available.
Thank you
but
so
you will
much.
soon pay.
Okay. Well, that was Professor Mohammed Usman, an expert in international relations, professor from the Bayes University. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll have you again another time.
You are welcome, sir.
Thank you. All right, let's take a quick break, and this time we'll take a look at sports in 60 seconds.
Hello, welcome to Trust Sports in 60 seconds. Nigeria Super Falcons fought a tough battle, edging out Ghana's Black Queens to reach the final round of the qualification series for next year's Women African Cup of Nations to be hosted by Morocco. And now to Formula One, Max Verstappen held off a charging Lewis Hamilton to win the United States Grand Prix on Sunday and extended his Formula One World Championship lead to 12 points. Rangers review columnist Gary Kamodi believes Liam Balogun deserves to be rewarded with a new contract following his impressive displays for the club this season. And finally, Barcelona has hit out at the violent and disdain act that head coach Ronald Koeman was subjected to as he attempted to leave Camp Nou on Sunday afternoon after El Clasico's defeat to Real Madrid. Koeman became the first Barcelona manager in 81 years to lose his first 3 El Clasicos following Madrid's 2-1 win. And that's all the top headlines on Trust Sports in 60 seconds. Don't forget to subscribe, like and follow us across all social media platforms.
Well, there you have it, sports in 60 seconds. And with that, we've come to the end of the Daybreak on Trust Television. And we hope that you will join us tomorrow again. For those who have missed, if you're just joining, you can catch up on our YouTube channel and also across all our social media handles. There will be snippets, and then, of course, there will be the full discussions there for you to watch over and over. Join us again tomorrow for another time on the program. My name is Ayuba Illa.
And I'm Zainab Bala. Thank you so much for sticking with us.